Many people say that they want to write a book, yet 9 out of every 10 people who start writing a book never finish it, leaving one of their biggest dreams unfulfilled. So, what is it about the 1 in 10 people who do finish writing their book? What do they have, and what drives them to complete their books, their plays, and their songs? Welcome to the Editor's Desk, where we explore their writing experiences, their motivations, and their struggles. And now, here are your hosts, author, writing coach, and self-publishing guide, Lynn Everard, and author, Louise Gomez. Welcome to the Editor's Desk. It is Thursday at 5:30 p.m. and you are watching us live. And my name is Lynn Everard.
Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Louise Gomez.
So we've been doing this show for 5 months. We're actually in our 6th month now.
Wow, time flies.
We've had all kinds of authors, all kinds of stories. And if you read our social media, you know we were getting you ready for to go a little deeper into some topics this year, and we have exactly that for you tonight.
Yeah, and reading this book this week, The Spirits of Amoskeag, just reading it, you know, the commonality between our story, it's very similar, right? Because I want to call Lois the spirit whisperer, right? Where she's able to connect to spirits. I mean, that's what we did in our past life story. We channeled not only who we were, but other people from our past life. So now we're actually meeting people that are doing similar things. So that was quite interesting. And the story was fascinating. I could not put it down, I have to tell you. And I am going to read Lois's bio because I cannot wait to have her, to introduce her. And she has a long bio, so I'm going to make it real. I'm going to kind of cut it a little bit. But Lois Hermann is a success coach, spiritual teacher, international corporate trainer, healthcare executive, professional speaker, author, and body-mind medicine expert, a board-certified hypnotist through the National Guild of Hypnotists. Lois has extensive training in advanced hypnosis techniques, neurolinguistic programming, and is an energy clearing and alignment expert. She is a multi-registered medical professional and award-winning pioneer in the field of diagnostic ultrasound. Welcome to the show, Lois. How are you?
I'm doing well. I was noticing that you're from the warmer weather. I'm up here in New Hampshire where we have snow.
Oh, I know.
Pretty. It's so pretty. It's nice light dusting, and it's very pretty.
So the book takes place in New Hampshire.
Yes, it does.
And tell us, now I know you're not originally from New Hampshire. Maybe you want to give us a little background and then tell us how you got there, and then we can delve a little bit more.
Sure. I'm an Army brat. You're not supposed to say that. I'm a military child. But anyway, born in Japan, moved 30 times in my life.
Wow.
And moved up here about 30 years ago. I took a job with Hewlett Packard. I was a medical professional, and I took a job developing ultrasound systems and developing training programs for a medical company. So it was a pretty fascinating journey. And I moved up here. I moved into a house with a ghost.
Yes.
And my life has never been the same. So.
Yes. And it's fascinating how in the story, you'll tell us a little bit more, but you were able to connect with these spirits, with this. The name of the book is The Spirits of Amoskeag, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Amoskeag, yes.
Oh,
it's a Native American native name. Yes, that's a region here, Amoskeag. Yes.
And so it's so fascinating because this took place in the 1800s before there were child labor laws.
Correct.
So maybe you want to get into a little bit about how this all started and just, you know, lead us into a little bit more about how this passion, I would say, right? Because she just...
Yes. Because this is the first of 4 books that I've written. I loved your beginning, all of the different people who say they're going to write a book and then don't. And in the past 5 years, I've written 4 books. So
Wow, that's
I
impressive.
have a little bit of a mania about book writing. And this year, I'm going to take a pause. But what happened was I am a metaphysical hypnotist, which means if either of you wants to connect with your angel's guide's grandmother, you can. You go into trance, you can communicate with them. Well, I was actually hired to investigate the deaths at an assisted living facility outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. And Manchester is very well known for its mile-long mill buildings, long mill buildings that were created back in the 1800s. And this was about a mile outside of Manchester. It was an assisted living facility, and they had attended, the people who lived or worked there had attended 10 funerals in a 2-year period of their family members. None of the elderly had died. So there was something very strange about that. They hired me to investigate. They raised the money. They paid me to investigate. And I worked with the woman who hired me, went into trance. And sure enough, these spirits came through to tell them why they were doing what they did. And it turns out that it was the spirits mostly of children, and they had been excavating near this assisted living facility, and they wanted their bodies found because the history was that there at the time I had no idea what was going on. This was back in 2003, back when we were recording on the little cassette tapes. So I was recording everything and basically spoke with the lead spirit, which was an older man. He was in his 30s, and he said he would take all of these into the light if I would promise to tell their story. So I did, and I had written everything, I had scribed, I was on the path of writing the story. And the woman who hired me left and took another job. And she said, "You don't need to do this. It's all done. It's all good." And of course, life gets in the way. And 10 years later, I met a gentleman. I don't know whether you're familiar with networking meetings.
Yeah.
I was at a very business-like networking meeting, and I met this gentleman who said, "I really need your help to get back into the job market." He was an out-of-work business executive. And he said, "I really can't afford your full rate, but I'm told I'm supposed to help you write a book." So I have so many stories that I could write about my clients, the different experiences, the spirits that have come through, so many stories. So I take him on. He gets a job, vice president of sales. I fell and broke my wrist. And in my meditation, I heard this young voice say, "What about our story? You promised." And I went, "Holy cow, I did 10 years earlier." So I didn't tell Peter about this. He was my partner, and he was the one that was going into trance at this point. And I said, "Peter, let's see what story we're supposed to write." He goes into trance, bang, he's in the middle of the Manchester Mills. And we can take it from there. But this is their story because I made a promise. I'm the type of person, if I say I'm going to do something, I will follow through. So I reached out to the woman who had initially hired me, and I said, "We really need to write this story." And she's like, "Nope, it's all good." I said, "Please at least reach back out to your friends at this assisted living facility to find out if there have been any deaths, because in that 2-year period, they had documented the 10 deaths, plus there were 6 or more other hand amputations, and very strange things happened." So sure enough, in that 10-year period since we had done the clearing, everything stopped. Everything stopped. No deaths, no accidents, nothing. So they kept their word. Now it was my turn to keep my word. And that's what Peter and I set about to do.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know when I started reading the book and I read I'll call it the play-by-play
Yeah.
of that very first, when you put Peter under and that first conversation and that spirit came in, I was hooked for the rest of the book. I mean, it didn't matter, how many pages it was going to be. I had to keep reading until there was not a single word left for me to be able to read. And even now, I think about it and I say, I wonder if Lois has any more information, if she's come up with anything else since the book came out.
Well, there have been a lot of things that have happened since the book came out, and Peter and I were really struggling to trying to prove this because it was called the Great Unspeakable. And what happened was the reason that they were basically causing the accidents and even caused mine, they made me slip on my garden steps, was to get attention because of what had happened to their family members. So during this period of time, there were a lot of orphans because there were a lot of young unwed mothers working in the mills. And back in the 1800s, there weren't any contraceptives. So here they're teenagers alone, end up pregnant. They still have to work. So what they would do is the children would be placed in the orphanages. So the mom's still around, but the children are in the orphanages because the mom she's living in a dorm or wherever and she's working. She can't take care of the children as well. Well, the children were then put in and to work at the orphanages, at the mills very young. And these are these great big huge hydro-powered equipment with no on-off switches. And mostly the boys, there were a lot of the girls doing bobbin work and things like that, but the boys would crawl into these huge machines to oil the belts, to mend the belts, because they were small enough to crawl inside. And what had happened was when they got injured, they were considered expendable. And they were taken in the basement, euthanized, put in barrels, taken out in the middle of the night and dumped. And an animal carcass was put over their body. And their mother would be told that they ran away. So the mother is now out of the income from her son, and they were very proud of the work they were doing. Mother's now out the income. She's mourning the death of her child, and she's publicly humiliated for having a runaway. So they were angry, and that's part of why they caused a disturbance. And they were indeed excavating near that assisted living facility, and they would have, had they been aware, uncovered the bodies. So they wanted the bodies to be found. And because this is spiritual work, I'm so thrilled that the two of you get it, but the average person doesn't understand this at all. And they're just like, yeah, this is all kind of, you've made all this up. No, I believed these young ones. And so we started proving what Archangel Michael came through, and he said to us, prove who owned the land. So that's what we did. We started, Peter actually would go to the town hall and research the documents, and we researched back from present day, back to where the land had been in a trust owned by Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. So we had proved it ourselves, but I thought, I can't come out publicly and claim this. So I actually hired a law firm, a title company, and they researched it, but they researched from the original deeds of the land all the way forward to where the land was placed into trust by Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. So we saw it bookend from both directions, and we know that who owned the land that the assisted living facility was on was Amoskeag Manufacturing Company.
Lois, do you have any sense of whether the euthanization of these kids was pre-planned, or if it was just that when the first one happened, they didn't know what to do, and that's what they ended up doing, and then it became a pattern?
That's exactly right. That's absolutely right, Lynn. What happened, because after the original book, we continued on and we had the spirits that were the superintendents, if you will, came through, and they were hiding in the shadows. So we had them come through and say, crimes will be forgiven if you help to rectify this. Tell us what happened. So what they said is, initially the children's bodies were so mangled, they didn't know what to do. So they actually told us how they euthanized them by, a type of strangulation. They said we tried to be as gentle as possible, but they were so tortured and they didn't know what to do. So that's exactly what they did. But then it got carried away. Then it became more normal. And it became what they called the great unspeakable. And I'm sure that it was not just the Amoskeag Mills. This had to have happened all over the country, that because there were so many orphans back then, and they were mouths to feed, and they were used in child labor. That's the stories. What originally we were going to call the book "The Wounded Children of the Manchester Mills," but what happened with Peter, I was expecting more of the child stories to come through, and when he went into trance, we heard from the men who had to kill the children, the men who had to dump the bodies, and how they were tortured, or just broken, tortured as to what their job was. We heard from one of the women who was the wife of one of the superintendents, and her group of women were trying to, they were wanting to stop this. So we heard from more people. So what we recognized is that this did not just affect children, it affected all of society at the time. It affected everyone. It was the great unspeakable. And so our mission was to tell their story. And so that's what we did, is Peter and I really set about to tell people the story. And what was fun, and you as authors may know this, but I was told initially, put some pictures in there. So I found some pictures from the Manchester Mills and put them in there. And then I found out that any photograph that is 75 years or older US is public domain. It has to be 100 years or older for international. But I thought, holy cannoli, I can put in more pictures. So I went in and I ended up finding a lot of pictures of these children. And there were a lot of pictures from a gentleman by the name of Lois Hermann. And that's a fascinating story, because what happened was he was a school teacher, and the teachers were very frustrated because the children were all going to work in the mills instead of continuing their education. So they designed a plan to expose the fact that all these children were being used in child labor. And what he did is he went around posing as a photographer, and he would take pictures of the big equipment, and he'd say, "Hey, small child, come stand here. Tell me your story. What is your name? How old are you? How long have you been working here?" And he would get all this information from the child, taking pictures of the equipment with the children in front of it. And he did this for a period of time, went around the country and took all these pictures. That's why there are so many of these amazing pictures of the children. And then they did a big expose. And it was the cranberry box, it was the fish hatcheries, it was the coal mines. So many of these industries used these small children, and used and abused the small children because they were cheap money. They didn't have to pay them much. They were very controllable, and they were expendable. So it was a very fascinating education for me to learn about what all happened back then, because I started researching. I researched stories of abortions that were backroom abortions that happened, and just different horrible stories of the strife that people went through at the time.
Thank you for the pictures, because it really gave an extra layer of connection for me. When I would see their faces, and I'd feel the sadness.
Yes.
Because that's the only life they knew. And one of the stories was, I just teared up when you had said one of them was on the mill, and then literally the body was just mangled and blood everywhere. And then a half hour later, they asked the next child to go in there and do the same job. I'm like, that's abuse. This is complete abuse, and nobody did anything. Nobody did anything.
No one was there to rescue the children. And it's very interesting. This is part and parcel why I am so passionate about rescuing children, about the different crimes against children that have gone on for a long time, a long time.
Well,
You know,
thanks.
one aspect of this too that I thought was fascinating was that you were able to capture that the children, even though maybe they didn't have a lot of choice in doing this, they were very proud of their work and of what they were doing.
Yes.
One of the things that amazed me was somewhere in the book you gave a statistic about just how much linen
Oh,
these mills were producing per hour. And when I read that number, it blew me away because the whole thing was a mile long. But
Yes.
you wouldn't think about all this linen being produced out of just that one place. I don't remember the number exactly, but it blew my mind when I read it.
Yes. And the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company was the greatest producer of gingham and linen at the time in all of history because of they had and I look back, it's kind of sad. It's Amoskeag Manufacturing Company, but the Amoskeag Native Americans, that was their fishery. That was the salmon run. And the manufacturing companies took over that waterway. So it basically destroyed their fishing spot. So because the water came right down through there, and then they rerouted the water through the mills. And it's just interesting how many different things that we have done over the years. And you can only imagine that they were also dumping the different, chemicals and stuff into the water, and a lot that's all been cleaned up, of course. But there have been history of smallpox in in one of the sections of the bills that was taken down, but it was the orphans that were used to clean up in the smallpox areas. So they used the children for the undesirable jobs. Yeah.
So, are there any recent developments in this story of things that you may have found out within the last, say, year or so?
Well, what happened was there was a woman named Marie. I don't know whether you would call her a governess or what, but she was the orphanage curator, and she was the one that was the most angry because she gave us so much information. She was so angry that her boys were going missing.
right.
And she was the one that would say, that one boy was, close, he was 17. He had been saving his money, he was going to be leaving the orphanage and being out on his own. He was so proud, and then he just shows he's missing. And she went trying to find him, and of course, gets nowhere. But she had been keeping a box of information about all of these children that were in her orphanage, their birth dates, their names, their date of death, or the day that they went missing. And so she kept saying, "Find my box. My box has the proof. My box has the proof." And so we tried to find the box, and we were told that it might be with Catholic Charities, which is now up in Canada. And I did reach out up there, have not found the box yet. Someday I'm thinking the box will come through. But Archangel Michael said, "Your job is done. You don't have to prove anything. Your job was to help tell their story and help them into the light." My main job was how to help these lost souls to a place of healing. Well, a pretty magical thing happened about a year after I had published the book. And the way that I published it the first time was through my BNI connections. There was a printer there who just printed business cards and all, and I had no idea how to publish a book. I just knew I had to do this. So he printed out 200 of the books initially. But the very, very first copy, he met me at a local library of one of the little towns around here, and he showed up on a motorcycle and he gave me the first copy of a book. It was Memorial Day weekend. I will always remember that. So a year later, I am doing a presentation because I'm a corporate kind of person. I like my PowerPoints. And I was doing a PowerPoint presentation to a group of psychics. At the very end, this woman came up to me and she says, "Is it your birthday?" I said, "No." She says, well, the whole time you were speaking, there was a young man standing next to you, the spirit of a young man standing next to you with a cupcake and a single lit candle wanting to give it to you. And I mean, even now when I say this, I get God bumps. It was the exact 1 year anniversary of their book. I had
Wow.
completely forgotten. It was Memorial Day weekend. And they have come through time and again saying, thank you. Thank you for helping us. Thank you for listening to us. And at that point, we had given up on trying. We were still trying to find the book, or I'm sorry, the box. But what I did is Peter and I had uncovered a couple of other sites. One, we could have actually found bodies. But what we decided is let them rest.
Yes.
And we actually had a priest say a mass for them instead, so that they could be at peace. And that feels right to me, is to share their story. They were pleased that their story was finally told. They were vindicated. Their information is out there. And I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot. And it was my first foray into the books. But what happened was, in the year, and let me just see when this was, because I actually have an afterword in this book, in the last book. In May of 2019, the same weekend that Notre Dame burned, 750 of their books were lost in a warehouse fire.
Wow.
And I was devastated because they were not insured. Again, if people want to learn how to write a book, I can tell you everything to not do because I've done it. And so after the first 200 were made, and sold, I decided to hire a publisher at that point, and she convinced me to purchase 1,000 books, which I did, and they were housed in this warehouse. Oh, no problem. You don't need to have insurance. Well, I didn't. And sure enough, that burned. Well, they came through in a meditation and said, you have a more important job now. You have satisfied, you have done for us. We thank you. Now you have a more important mission. And at that point was when Gary had come through as a client, and we ended up writing the trilogy, the Chronicles of Hope trilogy. That was my next most important mission. But
Well,
those are
that's
I
fabulous.
can't wait to read that one.
Yes. So we have a couple of minutes left,
Okay.
and maybe you could give us a very brief, maybe minute and a half overview of the trilogy.
Yes, the trilogy. So Gary, and I look at you and you remind me so much of Gary, Lynn. He came to me with difficulty sleeping, a brilliant genius man, and he goes into trance completely unaware. Like I said, if you wanted to connect with your grandmother, you could. I'm the scribe. I'm taking notes. He goes into trance, opens his eyes, looks me square in the face, and says, "We need your help to save humanity. Humanity is facing the next great apocalypse. If they don't change their ways, there may not be much time left." 6 pages of notes later, he comes out of trance, and I said, "What did you think of that?" And he said, "It was very relaxing." What? He had no recollection. And the next time he came, I said, "Would you mind if I turned a little recording up on my phone?" Which I did. And 22 recorded sessions later, we just published the third of the trilogy in August. And this is called The Chronicles of Hope. And this happened back in 2016. It started. Well, we had sessions over a 2 year period. This was before any of this other craziness. I was thinking, oh, we've got 50, 100 years before this is coming to pass. But they gave us specific information about what we need to do to shift the hate, the anger, the fear. We need to all come together. So that's true.
That's
Thank you.
fantastic, Lois. Thank you so much for being our guest and for sharing this
you.
wonderful information. We'll make sure that people know where to find your book on our Facebook page.
Yes.
And next week we have Mindy Sperancic on, and she is
Yeah.
going to tell us about her near-death experience and how it changed her life. And for now, we will wish
Thank
you
you
a
so
great
much.
evening and a great week. And see you again next week.
Stay tuned. See you next
Wonderful.
week.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Even if you have never written a book, you are still an author. In fact, we all are. In every moment, each of us is writing our own unique story that we call our lives. Because many of us are, as in the lyrics of the Dan Hill song, Sometimes When We Touch, writers still trapped within our truth. If this is you, why not start writing your thoughts in a journal? It will help you get your truth on paper and could just be the start of your own book. And don't forget to join us here every week for the next edition of The Editor's Desk.